Before we start today, many of you are aware, and some of you maybe not, that obviously Kathy Abbott passed away in March, and this talk is dedicated to her. And I'd just like to say a few words. Kathy was the beating heart of the Kirstenbosch Wednesday talks. She initiated them almost 20 years ago and managed them right up until her passing. Kathy's dedication and commitment went far beyond the Wednesday talks, and she volunteered at Kirstenbosch for a number of years and made an invaluable contribution to many Kirstenbosch events and projects. The speaker program for the talks was a source of great enjoyment and pride to Kathy, and the scheduling and coordinating of it was a task that she relished and mastered. I'll miss our talks and her caring inquiries into my life and the family and the business. Her cheerful presence at the door in the days of our in-person talks will remain with all those who knew her. Thank you, Kathy, for creating this wonderful resource, an event that brings joy and knowledge to so many on a regular basis. You are missed, but forever in our hearts. And at the end of the talk, we'll have a slide up, and we'll keep the room open for a little bit longer for anybody who wants to chat or comment or just, remember Kathy in any way at the end of the talk. Right. So with that, it brings us to our Wednesday talks, which are obviously hosted by Sandy and Straight Nature and Room to Grow. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Doug Euston-Brown. Doug is Douglas works as an independent botanical consultant with a special focus on vegetation monitoring and conservation of natural ecosystems, especially in the wild and in remote areas. His interest in the Baviaanskloof was sparked when he studied the vegetation of the area for his master's degree, and he has since made the Baviaanskloof a second home. And his fieldwork, his fieldwork in the area has led to the discovery of several new species, which are introduced in his book for the first time. So as Doug gives us his talk, in the Q&A section, please feel free to put down questions, and we'll get to them at the end. So thank you, Douglas, and over to you.
Thanks, Brett. And thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a massive privilege for myself and Magritte to be able to have produced this book and also to present it to you here. I've been visiting the kloof since 1992, and Magritte has been living at Zandvlakte since 1979. So we're very happy and proud of our achievement. This is us last month in the garden at Zandvlakte, and you can see how happy we are. Just to give you the layout of the talk, I'm going to start with some spectacular scenery. The spectacular scenery in Baviaanskloof is what people come back for. Then I'll go on to a little bit on how to use the book, and then the main sort of part of the talk is the 5 special features that are illustrated in the book, and that's cedars, the wild peach, vygie, capsules, daisy, bracts and seeds, and spekboom. Then I'll talk a bit about the endemics and the new and undescribed species. Then our acknowledgements, and then we'll close off with some more spectacular scenery, and hopefully it's time for questions. So this is the western entrance to the reserve at Baviaanskloof, in the kloof itself. So there's an Edon conglomerate cliff that you drive, as you drive in, that's what you see first. These are the Baviaanskloof mountains. This is Skolsberg Peak. This is at Curum. This is in the reserve. The folded sandstone mountains are one of the features that you can admire as you're driving through. And the bright green in the distance there is spekboom, and these are doringboom. Are you driving through Doringveld when you drive through there, and it's teeming with game. This is Nieuwekloof Pass. This is where you enter the Baviaanskloof from the western end. The tops of these cliffs is where you find the Baviaanskloof cedar tree. This is from the top of the mountain on Zandvlakte Farm, looking eastward, down the Baviaanskloof Valley. The grey shrub is Aspos Tyronia incana. This is a tierhout tree on the top of Bergplaats, on the top of Combrings Pass. It's getting a bit of physiotherapy from this buffalo. The tierhout tree is interesting because its distribution ends in the Baviaanskloof, and it goes all the way up to KwaZulu-Natal. There's loads of bushbuck, eland herds, kudu. You will definitely see kudu. And then one of the amazing features of the Baviaanskloof is the narrow kloofs. There are hundreds of these little narrow ravines going into the side of the mountain, and the cliff flora is unique. A lot of the endemics occur in these kloofs. This is Gert-Smitskloof. So there's a lot of succulents that growing on the cliffs in the Baviaanskloof. This is Gasteria rawlinsoni. It's one of the endemics. It's listed as rare, and it hangs off the cliffs. It's a spectacular plant. Okay, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how to use the book, because this will help you to extract information from the book. It's packed with information, way more than most other field guides. And if you look at these pages on page 38 and 39 and just go through it, it will help you to extract information and appreciate the book for what it is. So there's over 1,100 species in the book, and this is about 70% of the 1,600 species we've recorded growing in the area. The book covers ferns, gymnosperms, all the grasses, restios, reeds, and the nice bulbs, and then also all the dicots. And it's important to look at the family. Each family is introduced, and there's interesting information in that family introduction. The genera and the species names, the derivation is given. So the reason that explains the Latin origin of the name. And the other important thing that I want to point out is that underneath the photographs is a location and a date, and that's the rough place where the photograph was taken, and also the date the photograph was taken. That's quite useful. All the place names that you see in the book are indicated on the inside cover, and the back cover is this map with all these place names, and it shows you the amount of the places where we visited and where most of the photographs were taken. So we didn't spend too much time in the orange growing area around Potensi Hankie and also state level Karoo. We didn't spend much time, but here in the heart of the Baviaanskloof is where most of our photographs were taken. This also gives you an idea of the study area. There's Jobertina, this is the Langkloof, and this is the Koge Mountains here. This is the Baviaanskloof Valley, Baviaanskloof Mountain Range here, the Sufferwood Windhoek here, State Level, Willowmore, Uniondale's just off to the west, and PE is just off here. So this is reserve area. Without the reserve, we wouldn't have this book. So thanks to the East Cape Tourism Agency. This just to give you an idea of this is kind of where we spend most of our energy. Exotic species are indicated with an asterisk. There are 30 exotic species presented in the book, and this is about 30% of the 100 exotic species we've recorded. The common names are provided up next to, so there's, first you get the species name, then the most recent old name, and then the common name next to that. Look out for common names for genera. Sometimes only the genus has a common name, but not the species. And then also look out at the bottom here for other names, which there's Afrikaans, Xhosa, Zulu, and Sotho names, if they're available. The photographic credits appear as initials next to the photographs. And that's the one thing I'll show you, the photographic credits now, and then also look out for habitat. It tells you the vegetation type, and these vegetation types are described at the beginning of the book in the introduction, and there's a vegetation map that goes along with that. So there's 23 contributing photographers. I just want to mention a few of the people that have contributed quite a lot. Margriet Kruger, obviously my co-author, Ernst van Jaarsveld as well, also some things. I think he's the only person in the world with photographs of some of the things. Then Gavin Schaefer, Roger Smith, George Ferreira, Nicola van Berkel, and Graham Pinner were amazing in providing great photographs. Okay, we're moving on to the special features. This is the Baviaanskloof cedar, or Willowmore cedar. It's almost endemic to the Baviaanskloof. It's listed as near threatened. It was harvested in the past. It's an interesting tree because it's not like the common mountain cypress that you get all the way up to tropical Africa that resprouts after fire. This tree is killed by fire, so it occupies a very specific habitat. This is a photograph by Roger Smith. It shows clearly the habitat that this tree occupies at the top of cliffs. It seems to be in places that don't get burnt as frequently as the surrounding fynbos. So it's probably got a fire return interval maybe 50 to 100 years, whereas most of the fynbossen areas will burn sort of every 10 or 20 years. This is on the top of the Baviaanskloof range, a young tree that was scorched in a fire. The skeletons last for ages. The wood is very hard and durable, and these skeletons, you can see them standing on the cliff tops and ridge lines. The wood is very hard and durable. It's got its own insect repellent, so you don't need to treat it. And in the olden days, they used to cut the trees and the kloofs and cut them into stumps, and then wait for floods to wash the stumps down into more accessible areas. And today you can still find fence poles. This is near Boerkloof. Look out in the background here how barren these slopes are, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that when we reach the spekboom special feature. Okay, this is the wild peach and its host. It tells the story of this very common tree. You'll note it goes from Cape Peninsula all the way up into tropical Africa. It's a common tree. And it's got a poison, a toxin, a chemical defense in its leaves to stop things from eating it. But the amazing thing is that this butterfly, the Acrea garden butterfly, lays its eggs on the back surface of the leaves, and these worms have evolved to be able to cope with dealing with this toxin in the leaves, and it stores the toxin in its spines. And you'll see this butterfly often. It's a very common and a well-known butterfly. But what I want to show you first is how this drawing by Megan Potgieter, she illustrated all the drawings in the book are done by Megan Potgieter. And it started off with me WhatsApping her this scribble. Well, I think it's quite nice. I mean, you can see clearly what's a bird and what's a butterfly, and it's clear. But from that, she sent me this to see if I was going to agree that this is what I was talking about. And it's amazing. how it went from that to this, and then this is the final product. And this is an amazing drawing because it captures so much of what happens in the Baviaanskloof. And this tree has a whole ecosystem surrounding it. The red arrow on the black seeds attracts birds like red-winged starling and a lot of other bird species, and they disperse the seeds. Flowers are pollinated by bees, and the other amazing thing is that the Deirdric's cuckoo has evolved an ability to eat the worms, and it doesn't eat the entire worm. It breaks the worm open on a twig or a rock and eats the inside of the worm and discards the spiny outside, which is where the toxins are. This is a cliff face on the side of the picture, and some of the cliff dwelling endemics are depicted here as well. So thank you, Megan, for this beautiful drawing. Okay, the next special features of the vygie capsule. This is probably my favorite page in the book. It lists the genera that you find in the Baviaanskloof down here, and then features of the capsule on the top. So if you've got a vygie capsule, you can quickly look up what genus it belongs to. So vygie capsules are storage mechanisms to store the seed, and they only open and release the seed when it's raining, and this acts to protect and keep the seed safe when it's in dry conditions, and only when it rains, which sometimes in dry areas is quite seldom, does the seed actually get released into a wet environment where it's not going to lie around for a long time. It'll germinate if it's the right time of the year. And what's amazing about them is the different kind of strategies and different kinds of capsules that have evolved over time. This photograph is of a raschia, and I'm just going to run through the different kind of characteristics that these capsules have. So the flower basically gets pollinated, and then this capsule gets produced. And this, in Russia, the capsule can last on the plant for a couple of years. So this is the drawing of the Russia open capsule on this side, and this is a photograph. And I just want to point out what the different things are, because I really struggled in my earlier years to work out what was actually going on when you open these capsules. So the expanding keels are outlined in red, and they expand when the capsule gets wet, and then it forces the capsule to open up. So these are the expanding keels, the dark brown here. The valves are the kind of lid of the vygie, and they fold open when it gets wet. In Russia, these valves don't have wings. In other genera like Lampranthus, Delosperma, Chrysanthemum, the valves actually have transparent wings that you can see. So the locules or seed chambers are outlined in purple. These are where the seeds are actually stored. Inside at the bottom of the seed chamber, you get these little white hairs. They're called funicular hairs. We don't really know what the function of them is, but it's probably it's a way of the vygie kind of hedging its bets, because the seeds get caught up in those little hairs. When it rains, not all seeds get released in that rainfall event. When it dries out, the capsule will close up again, and some of the seeds will be left. So not all the seeds get dispersed in one rainfall event. Closing bodies are the little things. Not all capsules have them. Russia has them, and it also has little rodlets that support the covering membrane, which are difficult to see here, but you will be able to see them if you use a hand lens. So the covering membranes are outlined in green here, and they act to when a raindrop lands on top of them, it creates pressure inside the seed chamber and forces a seed to be ejected out of the side of the capsule. This is Glotophyllum depressum. These are open capsules. It's on a rainy day. The dark things are the expanding keels. These are the valves. And then those things that look like teeth are the closing bodies. They're very big in Glotophyllum. So that's the drawing, and that's the actual capsule. Those brown things are seeds. I can't see any seeds, and they must have all been released already. This is Mestaclima. Mestaclima is interesting in that the valves do have wings, but the wings are actually curved under, so it doesn't look like they've got wings. But what you can see are the wings on the actual keels, and it's these little points on the tips of the wings on the keels is what indicates that it's the genus Mestaclima, the Vygie. So I hope people use and appreciate this page. There's no excuse not to go walking in the rain. And there's a lot of discoveries to be made about how these capsules work. And some capsules are more primitive, like Mesembryanthemum. It has a more primitive kind of capsule. This used to be called Aptenia. It's now Mesembryanthemum cordifolium. In this genus, the valve wings are actually folded in, and this helps to trap the seeds inside the capsule. It's usually got 4 or 5 locules. It's the only genus that you'll find that has 4 locules. The covering membranes are reduced, so it's not there. The keels are parallel, so in Russia the keels are divergent. There's no funicular hairs. There's no closing bodies. And the capsule soft and spongy. So these are kind of weedy mesems, and these capsules actually fall off the parent plant. They're usually dispersed in water or wind while the seeds are still in them. Okay, that's it for the mesem capsules. We're moving on to the daisy bracts and seeds. So the involucral bracts of the daisies are the most important feature to look at when you're trying to identify the genera. And I'm just going to run through a few examples, but there's 4 pages of these drawings, and they're really useful visual key. Just to, if you've got a daisy in your hand, you can get an idea of what genus it might be. And the seeds are also very distinctive in genera. So in Callumia, it's a simple nut. In Dimorphotheca, it's a flattened winged seed. And then some of these genera have these pappus bristles, and some pappus bristles are simple and others have barbs on them. So this is a very useful tool just to quickly look up. So a few examples. Athanasia doesn't have any ray florets, so it's only got these discoid flower heads. The bracts are scaly, and they're always a bunch of heads together in Athanasia. In Callumia, Baviaanskloof angustifolia here, the bracts are prickly. There's only Baviaanskloof and Callumia that have these prickly bracts. So I want to show you another example, a few examples. This is Asona. It's got smooth bracts that are in one row, and the bracts are fused. That's gives you an example there. The bracts are completely fused. There's no calyces underneath. It's totally bare, the peduncle. These are the pappus bristles on the fruit. This is Senecio rhomboideus. It also might think it's an Asona because the bracts are smooth and in one row, but these 2 calyces just underneath are the giveaway that it's Senecio. So all Senecios have these calyces. They're often black-tipped, and they're sometimes more on the actual involucral bracts. Leucinia is easy to recognize because it's got these membranous margins on the bracts. That's very distinctive. If you just look underneath the flower, you'll see them. The seeds of Leucinia are also very distinctive. They look like parachutes. This is a seed head. The seed's upside down, tuft of hairs over there. There's the achene, and then the actual pappus is papery and light, and these are wind dispersed. Okay, we're moving on to spekboom now. everybody knows spekboom. 20 years ago, nobody knew spekboom, but now you can't get away from spekboom. It's on every pavement, everywhere. And it's interesting, this is the original distribution of spekboom veld, the dark green. It goes right up the Kocha Valley, right up the Baviaanskloof Valley, and also in the state level Karoo. The interesting thing is if you go to the state level Karoo and look on these slopes, you won't see any spekboom. It's totally gone. And you'll ask what happened. And it's a bit of a disaster. It's a major catastrophe, and it's not. It's a number of contributing factors. There was a prickly pear invasion in the 60s that was part of the problem. There's been countless droughts and long periods, dry periods, but the main contributing factor is Angora goats. They've just eaten the spekboom out of the landscape. And in response to this problem, the subtropical thicket restoration program's been going on for over 10 years now, and they've planted spekboom back into the landscape and demonstrated that it's a feasible way of actually restoring these degraded areas. They've estimated that there's 1.2 million hectares of spekboom veld that's been compromised by overgrazing. And to give you an idea of 1.2 million hectares, that equates to about 24 Cape Peninsulas. Just to give you a sense of, because when you say a million, my mind doesn't comprehend what a million is. But 24 peninsulas where spekboom used to be and now has been eaten out, it's devastating. But this program has demonstrated in a short period of time that it's feasible and possible to do something. So there's a lot more that needs to be done on spekboom. It's an interesting plot because there's a lot about it that's interesting, but the one thing I want to point out is that it's sandwiched between two biomes. So on the arid side, there's succulent Karoo, and on the other side, it's the fynbos biome, and it's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's in the succulent Karoo, it's too arid and too cold often. Doesn't like frost, and so it's struggling on the arid side of its distribution, and then on the fynbos side of its distribution, it gets hammered by fires that burn frequently in fynbos. So it's kind of got quite a difficult. It's in quite a difficult situation. But the thing about it is that it's actually able to survive fire, and this is a plant in the Kocha Mountains this veld is less than a year old, and the spekboom has managed to survive. And the bark gets scorched, but it actually kind of peels off like a snake or a crustacean, and the fresh skin is exposed. Okay, so we're moving on to endemics, a new and undescribed species. This is Crassula cremnophylla. It's endemic to the Baviaanskloof. There's 90 endemic species in the Baviaanskloof, and that number is steadily climbing as we discover new plants there. This is it grows on rocky, shady rocky areas in the Baviaanskloof Mountains, listed as rare. There's a photo by Ernst van Jaarsveld. This Tanthus flamosus, it's a Kocha flame lily. It only grows on cliffs around Grootrivierpoort and the Kocha Dam. It's listed as critically rare. It's safe on the cliffs, but there's very few of them. This is Indigofera flocki. It's named after Jan Vlok, who first found it. It only grows in the northwestern part of the Kocha Mountains, and Brian Dupree is busy finishing off his PhD thesis on Indigofera, and he's going to publish it as Indigofera flocki. This is Amphiglossa calienoides. It's a daisy shrub. It grows in the Baviaanskloof and Kocha River valleys. It grows in the dry riverbeds, and it's got this interesting arching growth form, and it's a bit like Anka Karoo pensioncana, that the branches arch over, and then when the branch tip touches the ground, it roots. So it's able to spread and colonize and stabilize the riverbeds. Restio vallis simius is the restio endemic to the Baviaanskloof and Grootewindhoek Mountains. Vallis means valley, and simius is a Latin name for monkey, so it's referring to the place where the plant grows in the Baviaanskloof. It's listed as rare. Then there's a bunch of recently described Aspalathus species. This is Aspalathus florina. Aspalathus is the same genus as Rooibos tea. Rooibos tea is Aspalathus linearis. This is listed as endangered. It's only known from one population near Guyana in the southeastern Koga Mountains. This is Aspalathus duprezi. It's named after Brian Duprier, and it's got this corky bark which allows it to survive fires, and it grows into a tree over 5 meters tall. Yeah. Then Aspalathus modesta, it's endemic to the Baviaanskloof. It's only known from one population near the top of the Baviaanskloof Mountains, and it's listed as vulnerable. Aspalathus usnoides grows into a tall plant, maybe 4 or 5 meters tall, and it's got these long willowy hanging branches. And Charles Sturton described it, and he Usnea is the name for old man's bleard, the lichen that hangs from the yellowwood trees in Eisner Forest and dangles around in the wind. And Charles Sturton saw the similarity between old man's beard and this plant, and that's why it's called Usnoides. It's endangered. It only occurs in the Koga Valley near Corrida. Aspalathus vulpicordata, it's also endangered, also in the southeast Koga, only a few populations known. Vulpicordata means a fox's tail, and Charles Sturton, who described it, saw the similarity with these bracts with a fox's tail. Passerina ternata, this is an interesting plant from the top of the Baviaanskloof Mountains. Also only one population that's known at the moment. It's a resprouting species, and it's got sticky leaves and sticky flowers. This is Skolsberg Peak, the southern slopes of Skolsberg Peak in the Baviaanskloof Mountains. There's undescribed species hanging out here. One of them is an erica. We collected it for the first time in 2011, and I've made a few other collections. Some of the specimens have been lost, and yeah, I just haven't got around to getting somebody to help describe it. It occurs in shady, overhanging rocks and shares its habitat with the coral fern Glycenia. This is a diosma. It was first collected in 1992. It hasn't been described yet. It only occurs there on the southern slopes of the Skolsberg Peak. This is a phylica from the northwest Koga Mountains, also undescribed. Dave Underwood is busy doing his PhD on phylica, and he's hopefully going to sort this one out for us. This is a Soralia that Charles Sturton also thinks is undescribed. It occurs in the narrow ravines in the Baviaanskloof range. It also gets up to 4 or 5 meters tall. Got unusual white flowers. Okay, acknowledgements. These are the acknowledgements on page 501. There have been hundreds of people that have helped with this book, and I just want to run through the most important ones. Ernst van Jaarsveld, he's at Baviaanskloof now. I first met him in Baviaanskloof in 1992, and he's helped me over the years hugely with identifying plants, and then also encouraging us, me and Magritte, to get this book together. We kind of ran out of steam. We had this idea, but we didn't think we were going to be able to get the funds to publish the book. And then Ernst found out about it, and he gave us the confidence and said, you know, just go for it. We will find the funding. Don't worry about that. Just do the work. And he also sourced and found Megan Potgieter and realized that she was the best person to do the artwork. And he also wrote the text for the special features that Megan illustrated. Megan Potgieter, the artist, thank you so much. The the artwork in this book has really made a huge difference to the feel and made it really user-friendly for all of us. Anisha Dayaram from Sanby, she helped with the vegetation maps, and those vegetation maps are now, you can actually get them on Google Earth, and you can, you know, zoom in and look more closely at them. Straight Nature were unbelievable. Natalie Bell, I gave her the text, it was Dog's Breakfast, and she's turned it into a 5-star course at Mount Nelson. Unbelievable what she did with my text. And Dominic Grobson, the designer, the design of this book is really difficult, and Dominic, I'm sure he still hates me because it was a complete nightmare for him. And Pippa Parker for keeping us to our deadlines, and her passion, and yeah, it's just amazing to see these guys they're really good at their jobs. Sunflactor, Peter and Margriet Kruger have been unbelievable all along. All the staff and all their children. Yeah, they've, you know, we from the city, and we need to go to university to study biodiversity, but they understand ecosystem and biodiversity from within. They understand it. William Bond from University of Cape Town. He introduced me to the Baviaanskloof. Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency, they've been unbelievable. And then all the taxonomists and research scientists have been amazing. Okay, we're going to close off with spectacular scenery. This is Crassula perforata. This is a picture by Margriet of Cetanthus smithi. It's got these really cool twisted leaves. It's a common Cetanthus, and it flowers in spring. And it's, you know, when it's flowering, it's really spectacular. It's another one of the Enon conglomerate cliffs that you see as you're entering from the west. This is near Spearcoat and Doverkloof. It's an interesting angle because there's a rock formation called the crocodile, and it's a wonderful rock formation because it's almost 1 kilometer long. And these white rocks here are the head of the crocodile. You can walk on the other side of this hill, up the tail and up the back of the crocodile, but when you get to the head, it's pretty dangerous. This is a pillar of rock in the Nieuwekloof Pass. I happened to stop at one corner and get out the car, and it was towering above me, and I've never seen it before. I think it's got a name, but I think it deserves a special name. This is Vensterklip. You can walk also right up to it and put your head in through and look through the window. The longleaf cycad, they're common in the Baviaanskloof. This is an interesting species of cycad because it's the first cycad that Thunberg saw and collected when he did his travels in South Africa in 1772. And he actually collected a living plant and took it back to London. And today you can go and visit. It's the oldest living plant in Kew Gardens, and you can actually go and see it. This is in Boskloof at Koga Wilderness. It's an amazing, you can walk right up to these grove of these cycads. Tree fuchsias, Hilaria lucida, they're usually sub-canopy trees in forest, but in this sheltered ravine, they're trees 10-15 meters tall. The Ficusser, the Cape fig, they very common in some of the side ravines, and they attract a bunch of animals and birds, Nijzenluri. This is the rock pool in Boskloof, really special. Thank you, that's the end of my talk.
Wow, thank you, Douglas. What a glimpse into what seems to be a fantastic area, and obviously so exciting to see how much is still left to be discovered, and all the unclassified or unrecorded plants here. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and your passion with us and our listeners. We've got some questions, and let's have a look here. Yes, anybody, if you've got any questions, you can just pop them into the Q&A box and we'll take them from there. Alan has asked, as a visitor to the Baviaanskloof, is one able to get out and walk around to explore the different plants?
Yes, definitely. A lot of the Baviaanskloof outside the reserve is privately owned, and it's possible there's hiking trails and walks, and you can also just go exploring. Once you're in the actual reserve, then there's wild animals that and you can get out of your car, but you don't want to wander off without a ranger, and you can organize to have a ranger if you're wanting to do something special, but most of the actual walking is outside of the reserve. Yeah.
Penny has asked, how much browsing, I'm assuming she means grazing, can the spekboom tolerate? And connected to that, I wanted to ask you, what's the specific role of the spekboom in its biome? So now that you mentioned that there's a disaster that it's being removed, what was its function? What is its function in its natural habitat?
Okay, so it does tolerate a lot of browsing, but for some reason the Angora goats and spekboom don't agree. But so kudus eat the spekboom from the top, and then the skudu spreads out. Actually helps the spekboom to spread laterally. And then elephants break pieces off and throw them around and stand on them, and that actually they're able to grow from those broken off pieces. So it does tolerate. It doesn't have any spines, or it does have a slightly sour taste. So things don't kind of eat it that much, and there's only certain times a day that they actually eat it. But then your question, Brett, yeah, it's an incredibly important part of subtropical thicket and the way subtropical thicket functions, because one thing it does is covers the ground, and then it drops off leaves and creates a really thick, if you look underneath a dense thicket of spekboom, makes this thick mulch layer underneath the spekboom, and that mulch layer is a whole ecosystem of fungi and all sorts of things that actually generates nutrients in soil, and with that, when it rains, that mulch layer protects the soil from erosion. It absorbs moisture, and then when there's an opening in spekboom, or underneath spekboom, just a small opening, there's a whole lot of species like Papia capensis and a whole bunch of trees that regenerate underneath spekboom. So it's kind of like a pioneer species that a lot of other plant members of the thicket biome rely on to be able to regenerate. So it's one of the big problems is in areas where spekboom veld has been denuded, the system just basically collapses. Nothing happens, and without our intervention, it just gets stuck. At the moment, it looks like succulent karoo will move in, but in some parts of the Eastern Cape, there's not enough winter rainfall to support succulent karoo. The succulent karoo is a winter rainfall species biome. So there are these parts of the Eastern Cape that are it really looks worrying, and it is a disaster.
Cool. Thank you. And then Lisa's asked, I've seen what looks like tall cedars in the southern ravines of the Baviaans in the Euston-Brown Pass area. Can you verify that if this could be, could it be cedars?
Yes, those are cedar trees. So the Euston-Brown Pass is the best place to actually get close to and see the trees from your car. You don't even have to get out. But that's actually there's maybe one or two other places where you get close to them. but otherwise you'll only be able to see them far in the distance with your binoculars. You can pick them up on the tops of the cliffs. You know, I'm talking if you're not going to get out and walk for a few hours. So Nieuwe Palas, there's nice trees right next to the road there. Yeah.
Okay, there we go, Lisa. And then Carly here asks, are there nurseries growing the endangered and vulnerable species for reintroductions? And then asked a question about on the map at the start, it said Scipion. I think you mean the Scipion. Is it a misprint? I think it was one of the mountain names. I'm not sure. When one of the first.
Scipion.
Yes.
Scipion. I think that's correct.
Okay. So that's So the question is: are there any nurseries growing endangered and vulnerable species for the reintroduction?
There will be, but I'm not clued up on that side of things. But there definitely, you know, there's. I mean, if you go to Baviaanskloof, where Ernst is working now, the succulent collections. I mean, they've got everything growing there, and they'll be, you know, so they are.
Perfect. And then I wanted to, you mentioned that we know that there's some undescribed species. I mean, how many undescribed species are you aware of, and how many more do you think there might be? How much of the area is still to be explored, just in your experience?
Thanks, Brett. That it's a very underexplored. These mountains. Very few people have actually been and done. The surveys that need to be done to be able to turf up these undescribed species. So I'm aware of at least 10 or 15 undescribed species. I've mentioned a few in the talk, but there's quite a few others. And if you put it, I mean, if off the top of my head, I'd guess between 50 and 100, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. Especially on the high peaks, some of the Subtokop and Smutsberg, it's 2-day walk just to get there. Mm-hmm. So they're very, very seldom visited, and there's all sorts of genera that are very diverse in fynbos, and they're going to be undescribed species there for sure.
And then these would be generally those single populations. So they wouldn't be widely spread. You're looking at sort of single populations in specific areas.
I mean, I say that they refer to single populations. That's just because I went there and then found a single population. But over time, then you will find, there's another population here, there's another population, and there'll be a few more. So it's very unlikely for those to just be single populations, just because it's so underexplored.
Okay. Wow. Well, Douglas, thank you so very much. That looks like the end of our questions. And thank you once again for sharing your knowledge and your passion with us. And good luck with the book. And as you say, we're going to just leave the webinar open for a little bit afterwards for anybody to share any memories about Kathy. And we look forward to seeing you all in a month's time for our next talk. Thanks so much. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Douglas.